First and foremost, I thank God for giving me life and all the blessings He has showered on me, my family, the NRM comrades, the Ugandans, and the Africans over these 80 years, numerous challenges notwithstanding. It must have been God's design that in 1944 I was born among the Banyankore-Bahororo, living in the savannah, highland, forest area that the colonial borders put the bigger part of in Uganda and some parts in Rwanda, a place called Omtara, and Tanzania, a place called Chivumbiro, the Kagera Salient. The Banyankore-Bahororo were people deeply steeped in wealth creation and a rules-based social order. Anybody that was not involved in wealth creation or did it negligently was regarded as a social misfit, ombaji, a squanderer of wealth in translation, a mugara, lazy, a kirare, a vagabond. With the Banyankore-Bahororo, you are to be a wealth creator if you are an adult. The Banyankore-Bahororo were engaged in the following emyoga: okulisa, cattle keeping, cattle rearing, okuhinga, cultivating, okuhesha, blacksmithing, okujuba, fishing a bit, not so much, okutanaga, making bows and arrows, okubeija, carpentry, okunogora, okubumba, pottery, okukomaga, back cloth making, although our bakochi neighbors and the Bahaya from Tanzania were the main suppliers of back cloth, embugo. Each group would excel in their mwoga. Mwoga is a specialization of livelihood. And through okchurka, barter trade, they would get from the other neighbors what they did not produce and give them what they produced. These societies of the Great Lakes, Banyankore-Bahororo, Buganda, Bunyoro, Karagwe, Rwanda, etc., were so advanced that the other European travelers that came to these areas were amazed by the level of production. I will quote for you what Henry Morton Stanley wrote in the years 1887 to 1889 when he passed through the Bunyoro Ankole area. On page 298 of his book entitled In the Darkest Africa, Volume 2 by Henry Stanley, he wrote as follows: a march of an hour and a half in the afternoon, apparently not far from the river, brought us to the populous district of the Babusese. The banana plantations were very extensive, reminding me of Uganda. This Stanley had come to Uganda in 1874, to Buganda in 1874. Now this was 1887, some years later, when he was passing through the part of Congo, which was part of Bunyoro, Ituri area. This is populated by Banyankore-Bahororo people, reminding me of Uganda. And their shades covered a multitude of hearts. This was recorded on December 5th, 1887. Fields of millet and sesame, plots of sweet potatoes occupied the outskirts of these plantations, and there was ample evidence round about that the land was thickly peopled, thickly populated, and industrially cultivated. End of quotes. This is H.M. Stanley writing in 1887 about Bunyoro. It's now, this part is now in Congo, but it is populated by Banyoro. Later on, while traveling through the Ruiz area of Ankole, on pages 371 to 372 of the same book, he wrote as follows: crossing, this is in quotes, crossing a narrow neck of land, descended into the basin of the Ruiz, that river which you are drying up, you fellows, in Mbarara. By degrees, the misty atmosphere of this region was clearing, and we could now see about 5 miles distance, and the contour of the pastoral plateau of Ankori. He was calling it Ankori, of Ankori. It was not by any means at its best. It was well into the drought season. He is writing Old English. It was a drought season, a dry season. The dry season had commenced 2 months previously. Hilly range, steep cone, hammock, and plain were clothed with grass ripe for fire, dry grass. The herds were numerous and all as fat as prize cattle. In the valley, we had passed over 4,000 cattle of the long-horned species. The basin of the Ruiz, which we were now in, and which was heart of Ankori, possessed scores of the finest herds of cattle I had never seen before. End of quotes. This is H.M. Stanley writing in 1889. As you will see later, this heritage of being part of the wealth creation society shaped my attitudes to society, politics, and the world. Secondly, the Banyankore-Bahororo society was a rules-based society. We have a comprehensive code of life for everything. The way you talk. The way you talk. Okanagamaka mahomo. Talk blah blah blah. The way you sit. The way you eat. If you put food in two cheeks at the same time, the way you relate to others, the way you fight, etc., etc. People are talking of no revenge, no. This is part of some of those traditions of your people which you don't study carefully. The Banyankore despise okugurukira. To surprise somebody and you attack him. You will never be welcomed anywhere. So when we were warning UPC, for them, I don't know what they thought, but we thought it was our duty to warn UPC. You remember how we were warning them. The modern Ugandans, including the religious leaders, could do well to attend to this aspect. It is all right to talk about general principles about discipline, spirituality, etc. However, the question is, what are the details? I see a big gap there. By going to the school system, I benefited a great deal through reading the Bible, studying history, geography, nature study, which later on turned out to be science, biology, politics, etc. By 1956, still at Chamate Primary School in Primary 4, I had started following global events. Through a Banyankore language newspaper, Wamanya, I followed the Suez Crisis and the resignation of Anthony Eden as the Prime Minister of UK. We had our newspaper called Wamanya, and by reading it, I was able to follow this story of the Suez Crisis of 1956. There was a globe in one of the classrooms. I was surprised to see much of the globe colored red, which showed the expanse of the then Soviet Union. Who were the USSR? We were told that Russia, as the Banyankore were calling it, they were not calling it Russia, but Russia, or Russia, was a very powerful country. Still at Chamate, through the wonderful Wamanya, I partially followed the story of the Uganda football team that went to England to play football barefooted, a phenomenon that surprised the British. By the time I arrived in Mbarara High School in 1959 for Junior Secondary 1, I had mastered all the indigenous technology of cattle keeping and crops husbandry. You people, you underestimate, because I can see why many people make mistakes. They don't have a base. They're just there. Bulikija kibatwala. But the traditional grounding in our indigenous economy make me very confident that there is nothing we cannot do. However, when I visited the Mbarara stock farm, I discovered that we needed to upgrade our production practices, introduce rotational grazing, fencing our land, what Honorable John Kawanga was talking about, killing ticks, growing crops in lines. Banyankore were not growing crops in line, they were just planted zigzag. Making water retention trenches in the gardens, Empazo, etc. When I went to Ntungamo for the April holidays, I told my father about this gap. The 8 years I spent in Mbarara added a lot to my knowledge and attitudes. I knew a lot about the whole world, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire and its collapse, the Egyptian civilization, the Dark Ages in Europe, the Renaissance, the steam engine, the Industrial Revolution, the slave trade, colonialism, etc. Therefore, by 1966, when I was 22 years old and had just finished the A level, I had 6 positions in my head. First, I was an expert indigenous wealth creator who had now been exposed to more science, the invisible world of the microbes that were both for evil, like the germs, or for good, like the fermentation, bacteria, and digestion. The barbed wire, sengenge, to control the movement of cattle instead of Museveni being the barbed wire to control the cattle that I had been for most of my life. Because I was the sengenge for our cows. stop them from going into people's gardens. I'm the one who had to stop them. The only time I've been in court was when I was diverted for football with some other children, and the cows entered somebody's garden, and they started eating the crops, the millet. By the time I came, they had eaten the millet, so I had committed the offense of okwonesa, when your cows damage crops. So I was taken to court, Muruka court, under Omtoma, under a ficus tree. And my father coached me. He said, when you go there, you say, Omshango Ningwichiriza. When you go there, you say, I plead guilty. If you do that, it will be easier for you. That's what I did. This was in 1956 when I went to that court. So, by visiting stock farm, I could see that fencing would make with barbed wire would make our life much easier. Better agro practices, the need for joining the money economy, etc. This modernized wealth creator and his compatriots appreciated all the other wealth creators and service providers. We had no time for sectarianism and identity chauvinism, even when we valued our group cultures. Our cattle were being bought by Warisimbi Mpanga, a trader from Kampala for the Kampala market, Bukenya from Mbarara for the Mbarara market, and by Mr. Shea from Ishaka, who was buying the cattle for the Chirembe market. And the people who were buying our cattle and giving us money to solve our problems, including paying school fees, were not Banyankore. In other words, the whole Ugandans were contributing to our prosperity. The 4 shops of our Indians in Tungamo, Budara, Hari, Mamdari, and another one whose name I do not remember, plus the 2 Arab shops of Bumbakare and his colleagues, were bringing to us cattle salt, soap, textiles, paraffin, etc., and buying on a small scale our milk, ghee, beans, and ground nuts. When my sister, Dr. Kajibiri, I think I saw her here, got polio in 1955, the Banyankore promptly called it a Banyarwanda disease, known as Embasa in Kinyarwanda. Only the Banyarwanda could treat it. Therefore, my mother and Kajibiri had to spend some months at Ruabara with the Mnyarwanda known as Kamugunda, where she was being administered with herbs that indeed saw her 85% recovery, both arms, one leg, and half of the other leg completely recovered. The good Byanzi, milk pots, amachuba, wooden pails, cow bells, emirebe, were coming from Igara, Ushenyi. The emiringa, brass bracelets, engoro, ivory bangles, etc., were coming from Congo, etc. It was therefore very sad that starting with 1954, some opportunists started spreading the opportunistic politics of sectarianism of DP for Catholics, UPC for Protestants, Kabakayeka for Baganda Protestants and Muslims. Therefore, by this time, I knew that we had a lot of potential and there is nothing that Uganda could not achieve. As already pointed out above, I despised sectarianism and could see that it is parasites that believe in sectarianism. Wealth creators appreciate all genuine wealth creating partners. Like for instance, when Idi Amin was expelling the Indians, I didn't see, we had no conflict with Indians in Tungam. Because Indians were bringing what we did not have, and they were taking what we had. So that war between Idi Amin and, there was some little conflict between the cotton ginners in Uganda and the Indians who had the monopoly of cotton ginning. There was some friction, but in our area there was no friction between us and the Indians. Secondly, again, as already pointed out above, I was sure that through equitable interaction with other countries, Uganda could stand on its own. Indeed, I never ate bread, omugati, until 1958, when I was 14 years old, when I tasted a slice of bread. My comment was, Kaninke Shankara. When I ate bread, it was like a honeycomb without honey. It was not as tasty as our foods. Milk, beef, oburingiri, blood meal, cassava, bananas, with sauce, millet, etc. I tasted rice for the first time at Mbara High School when I was 15 years, and it will not and has never compared well with our indigenous foods. Therefore, by this time, I was sure that Uganda is self-sufficient. I strongly believed in Pan-Africanism. What Kawanga was talking about, Mr. John Kawanga was talking about, how we linked up with the Mwalimu Nyerere and all those people. Following the strategy of Mwalimu Nyerere of creating the East African Common Market and Federation, so as to give wealth creators enough market for goods and services. In the history lessons, I had understood the value for the wealth creators of Germany, of the 39 kingdoms of the Germans, uniting into one Germany in 1871. Also, the example of the unification of Italy in 1861. Wealth creators needed markets. This is why I put all my choices to the University College Dar es Salaam. I wanted to be near Mwalimu Nyerere and the freedom fighters of Southern Africa of that time. These linkages with Mwalimu and the freedom fighters of Southern Africa came in handy when it came to sorting out internal problems in Uganda by holding to account those who endangered our future by pushing the sectarianism of tribe, religion, and gender chauvinism. Fourthly, I strongly believed in having a family now that I was an adolescent, whatever situation I was in, whether in peace or war. The idea of Treche being childless was most disturbing. I'm therefore most grateful to God and to Mama Janet for enabling me to have children that have now given me grandchildren in the midst of turbulences initially. They are a wonderful and productive group of Ugandans. Fifthly, from the beginning, I had contempt for educated people that only cared for the prosperity of their families. I believed in the mass line, prosperity for all, bona bagagawale, bona bagemebwe, immunization for all, bona basome, education for all. Unfortunately, Amin's coup interfered with our work, but much of it had taken root. When we came back in 1986, we resumed our efforts, and this is the cause of the partial revolution in the agricultural sector in the areas of dairy, beef, bananas, cassava, maize, fruits, fisheries sector, etc. After repeated efforts, by 2022, the homesteads in the money economy had risen to 61%, while the Abakorire Chida subsistence actors were only 39%. We intend to monetize the whole economy with the Chivaro, Otita, Aymar, Chura, maximizing returns. Sixth, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. In whatever I do, I try to avoid evil. Although I disagreed with the Scripture Union in 1965, I keep my belief in God, and it has helped our movement, and I believe that that is the reason God has continued to bless the NRA, UPDF, NRM, Uganda. In sowing the mustard seed, I quoted some examples of God's direct interventions in our struggles. It is these attitudes that I brought into our struggles when we had to deal with the distortion that actors had imposed on Uganda: politics of identity, underdevelopment, the elite line to the detriment of the mass line, neocolonialism, and dependency, etc. The reason for bringing this function to Kaumu and Chijaguzo is to salute the heroism of the masses and the freedom fighters that used this area to defeat the mistake makers. Chijaguzo Parish headquarters is where I would retreat to, to write some documents, but also get some sunshine for vitamin D, because the Kitemamasanga forest in the valley was always cold and the sun was blocked by the foliage. Kaumu camps helped us to do the following: adopt the code of conduct, which we did at Segirinya's camp, which was just across there. Rescue the guns dropped by Kaira near Dambwe before the Obotes took them. Again, by this time we were at Segirinya's camp, just across there. Start addressing the mistakes that resulted from the killing of one of our commanders called Kashanko. The interview with William Pike that exposed the NRA to the world. When William Pike interviewed me, it was actually around here when he visited us. And above all, the place at which I ordered General Sade and Hachigongo to finally start the Western Front in the Rwenzori Mountain before I left on the 12th of March, 1985, having confirmed that Obote was about to collapse, to look for more guns to ensure that we had enough armed soldiers to stop the chaos in the country on account of the vacuum consequent to the collapse of Obote, which I was sure was coming. I don't know whether Hachigongo is here. Is he here? Hachigongo. He was, I saw him there in the other place. It was in the, we were in a camp around here when I called him and General Saleh, and because now I knew we were ready to open the Western Front to take away 11 Battalion of Chef Ali and others, and they go with all the unarmed people, the women, the sick, to the west, and leave only General Saleh here with the fighters. And we did it here. That separation was done here in a camp around here. The Sigirinya camp was on Kanyanda side. Kanyanda is the other trading so far away, just across the small valley, where the other camps were around where we are now. There are many other landmark points in this area. Kaumu and Shijaguzo happen to be some of them. I'm therefore very happy that when, as a student, I brought these attitudes to some of my fellow students, they rhymed with their own thinking. That is how we formed USAF, University Students African Revolutionary Front at the University of Dar es Salaam, with the linkages with Makerere, the Rugundas. Is Dr. Rugunda here? Mbawaz was a junior member of that group. Mbawaz is here. Rugunda is the one who was the University of Nairobi, the Mwesugwa Blacks, the Roherus, etc. For NASA, during the anti-Amin struggle, UPM, during the short interim period of 1979-80, and PRA, NRA ever since 1981. All these groups were around these ideas, which I'm summarizing. All these groups have really been around the four ideological principles of patriotism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy, and the three historical missions of prosperity through wealth creation, because that's what we emphasize, prosperity through wealth creation. Strategic security against all threats to Africa, and using the African Brotherhood to achieve the first two historical missions. I thank, salute, and congratulate all Ugandans that over the years have rallied around these principles and goals. The celebrations of my 80 years is not just about me, but about all the resistance fighters.